Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I am going to share a sweet kindergarten poetry lesson that you could use during the month of April or anytime. Let's go. If we haven't met yet, my name is Dawn. I am a retired library teacher and I'm here to share some of my lessons and knowledge and fun stories about life in the library. So today I'm going to talk about a lesson that I used to use with kindergarten students during the month of April. The lesson is focused around the book called The Important Book by Margaret Wise Brown. For your prep, you will need to have a copy of The Important Book. Also, for the prep for this lesson, I would have my smartboard set up attached to my laptop, and I would have a blank Word document or Google Doc open on the screen. I would also have some construction paper of different colors because towards the end of the lesson, you are going to print out a single piece of paper and use the construction paper to frame that paper. Keep in mind, you want your construction paper to be the size that once you put a piece of printer paper on it, it will frame it. And a couple of pencils also, because what you are going to do with your students will be printed and signed by all your students at the end. So they'll need pencils at a table so that they can sign at the bottom of the paper. Okay, so let's just get started with the lesson. So what I would do is my kindergarten students would come in and they would sit down at the tables and I would talk to them about Poetry Month and that April was National Poetry Month. I would introduce this book to them, The Important Book by Margaret Wise Brown. And Margaret Wise Brown is an author they might be familiar with if they have read Goodnight Moon or The Runaway Bunny. You can mention that when you introduce the book if you'd like. One of the strategies that I use when I'm teaching is I like to think out loud. And when I'm thinking out loud, what I'm really doing is just sending some information to the students. And one way to do that is to think out loud or say something as if you were talking to yourself and not to them. So that is what I would do with this book. I would open up this book. You'll notice there is a Post-it tab. Before this lesson, I also went in to a few of the poems in this book and flagged out the ones that I plan to share with them. I would open up the book and I would say to myself, oh, I really like reading poetry books because I can skip around and everything still makes sense. It's different from a picture book because a picture book that is a story, you have to read from the beginning to the end, but a poetry book lets me skip around. That is my thinking out loud strategy for this book. So I would open up to one of the poems that I read, and I'm going to read one of them to you right now, actually. So the Important Book is a book of poems. It's actually was written in 1949, so it is just timeless kind of poetry. There is a pattern to every poem. Every poem in the book starts with the important thing about something, and then it describes that thing, and then the last sentence is, but the important thing about this something is. And so the first and the last line repeat itself, and everything in between is the description of that item. So let me just read you this poem. The important thing about a shoe is that you put your foot in it. You walk in it, you take it off at night, and it's warm when you take it off. But the important thing about a shoe is that you put your foot in it. Then I, of course, would show them the illustration. There is a subtle sense of humor in these poems that the kids really get and like. So I'll just read one more. The important thing about an apple is that it is round. It is red, you bite it, and it's white inside. And the juice splashes in your face, and it tastes like an apple, and it falls off a tree. But the important thing about an apple is that it is round. And so all the poems in the book follow the same pattern. I usually read the shoe, the apple, and the spoon. So those are the three that I chose that I like to share with my students, but of course you could pick any ones you want. Once I finished reading those few poems, I close the book and I say to the students, hey, wouldn't it be a great idea if we all wrote a poem together? Maybe we could write a poem about your teacher, Mrs. Smith. So they absolutely love that idea. And I tell them that we are going to use the same pattern that is in the important book, but we are going to, as a whole class, write a poem about Mrs. Smith. I tell them to start brainstorming and thinking of things that could describe Mrs. Smith, like everything that they know about her. Just the same way in this book, the apple was described, the shoe was described, what it looked like, what it smelled like, what it could do, all of those things. And so while you start thinking, I'll start typing. So then I would start typing on my laptop and they could see it up on the screen on the smartboard. And I would type, the important thing about Mrs. Smith is, and then I would ask the students for their ideas. And so a lot of them would raise their hands and give me an idea. The first student might say, is that she reads to us. So then I would type that. So that is going to be our first sentence, and that is going to be our ending sentence for the poem. And then I just continue to call on students, and they'll tell me things like her favorite color is purple, or she brings us out to recess, whatever it is they come up with, and we write the poem. So I usually will put 5 or 6 things. I keep it short and simple, just the way they are in the important book. Then I remind them how the last sentence to create the pattern will be the same as the first sentence. I finish typing it. I send it to the printer. Oh, I do ask them what they think their teacher's favorite color is, because I make sure I have a lot of different color construction paper, and I use whatever color they tell me is her favorite. Whether it really is her favorite or not, that's another question. But anyway, so I tell them that they're going to come and sign the bottom of the poem. I make sure that I don't let the poem, like the size of the font, take up more than 2/3 of the page. So at the bottom of the page, there's room for all of them to sign their name. And I leave it on a table with a bunch of pencils, and then I instruct them to go check out books and don't forget to sign. Then once they're all done checking out, I make sure I glue the poem to the construction paper frame, and when they line up for the teacher and the teacher returns, we present the finished and signed poem to the teacher. And we do it all in 30 minutes. This is about maybe 10 minutes to introduce the book, to read some of the poems, to talk about the pattern. Then 5 minutes type up the poem, and then they still have 10 or 15 minutes to check out, sign the poem, and line up for the teacher. And that's the whole lesson. If you do this lesson, it's a good idea to have a few extra copies of this book in your library, because it will be popular once you do that lesson that week with all your kindergarten classes. They will be looking for this book, and first graders will be looking for that book the next year as well. They always like old favorites, and they love books that you share with them or that their teacher shared with them. Just a little extra tip is that if you are using a book in a lesson, it's a good idea to have multiple copies of that book, because it will become popular. Well, that about wraps it up for this kindergarten poetry lesson. I will have a link to this book if you are interested in that in the bottom, along with the learning standards and learning objectives for this lesson. So look for that in the description. Don't forget, as always, support your local libraries, your independent bookstores, and your right to read.